Greetings. What I'd like to do today is to discuss hate crimes and terrorism and begin to take a closer look at some of the theories and methods to study hate crimes. The first question I would have is, how would you define a hate crime, and what do you think underlies the motivation to hate others? And how does this relate to the whole concept of evil? Think about some case studies that you're familiar with and why you decided to include those and why you decided to exclude others. We can look at the 1990 Hate Crime Statistics Act, which kind of gives us that definition basically, and Langton and Planty in their 2011 article discuss that, and they state that regarding hate crimes, crimes that manifest evidence of prejudice based on race, religion, sexual orientation, or ethnicity. And then in 1994, we include bias against persons with disabilities. And then in 2009, we include crimes of prejudice based on gender or gender identity. Can you think of other particular types of hate crimes that would not be included with this definition? And then when we talk about extremism, which often is discussed when we talk about hate crimes and terrorism and the relationships between the two, I like to look at extremism on a continuum, with both ends tending to be dangerous, from the very, very, very far right to the very, very, very far left. If you look at cases of hate, and if you look at cases of terrorism and extremist behavior, you're going to find some from the right and some from the left. So there you get my political bias. Moderate perhaps, or at least not too far right, too far left in that sense, because we'll see you don't find a whole lot of moderates engaging in terroristic behavior. And then we can begin to look at different types of memberships in terrorist groups, but also this relates, I think, to hate groups as well. Things begin to get clouded, and we play around with this term terrorism quite frequently, and I think the press has diluted it so much and confused us so much that I don't know how much of a useful concept it is anymore. But Ezekiel, in his book in 1995, talked about different types of memberships in hate groups, and talked about the national leader or the lieutenants, kind of the leaders who really put the hate groups together. Then he discusses the ordinary followers, the ones that would tend to have that same ideology, that belief system, that hatred toward a specific group or groups. And then the loose cannon, which basically is someone that kind of identifies with the ideology and beliefs, but says things that become quite politically contested in the press and begin to lead to some conflicts perhaps. And then the potential terrorist who is ready to commit violent acts given the leadership's motivation. Or they might go off on their own and then start committing violent acts. If we look at least in the United States, regarding hate crimes, we look at Langton and Planty's 2011 work, combining 2003-2009 data, that 58% of the hate crimes were based on race, 30% on ethnicity, 25% on associations with people that had particular characteristics, 15% on sexual orientation, 13% on perceived characteristics, and 12% on religion, and 10% on disability. And of course, you could break those down further if you go to the original data set to see which particular groups within race, ethnicity, or religion, for example, would have experienced hate crime victimization. And then we have terrorism. And again, here we start thinking about, well, how do we define terrorism, and what's the connection between terrorism and hate crime as far as the behaviors or activities are concerned? I'm pretty much in line with the thought that we spend too much time trying to connect terrorism with religion, and even sometimes a particular religion. And I think we run into a lot of theoretical and methodological problems there, because number one, we find that a vast majority of the major religions do not, the members of the major religions do not commit uh, terroristic behaviors, and that when a particular group is identified belonging to a particular religious denomination, many in that denomination are quite upset and are basically shocked by the terrorist activity and are very much opposed to it. I think what happens often is that extremism as a thought process is connected with whatever religious group, and it seems this has a lot of political motivation as well, because some groups will be defined based on whether they have a particular religious affiliation or not, and then others are not. And you see the press doing this again and again, and then you read these articles right and left as if the whole problem is a particular religion. And I think that runs into problems of recognizing, as we'll see later on in my videos, what I believe to be some of the root causes of terrorism, and religion's not one of them. And I probably should get a lot of negative response from others who say, no, no, it's religion, no, no, it's religion. And of course, said, okay, that's fine. Let's take a look at the empirical literature, the research. Show me that connection where religion is such a strong factor. And this includes hate crimes as well. You can see that I go back and forth between terrorism and hate crimes because as far as the actual behaviors are concerned, there may not be a whole lot of difference. So what factors do we use in defining terrorism? Do we look at the motivation? Do we look at what the outcome of a particular behavior is? Do we look at individuals, or do we look at groups, or how do we conceptualize that? And of course, the objectives of terrorism. Is it for publicity primarily, or political change, or to provoke some type of response, or to bring in fears, or to recruit members, or a combination of those? I think what you're going to find, there may be a primary objective, but there's often going to be multiple objectives, a combination. And one of our tasks is to figure out which are more important than others, but not to simply say it's this and not that. Mutually exclusive may not apply here, and that's important to recognize. And of course, the big question I have for you is, how are hate crimes and terrorism related? Again, some will say you can't put those together, and I say, well, I think maybe it's useful to put them together and then separate as you get into more specific aspects of understanding what we're looking at. Hudson, for example, looking at terrorist groups, talks about nationalist separatists, religious fundamentalists, new religious, social revolutionary, and right-wing terrorists. And that's from Hudson's work in 1999, and of course we can update that, and we do update that to see that there are many more typologies. That's just one way to look at it. And so here I just wanted to just briefly begin to get you into the whole idea of looking at this whole concept of hate crime and terrorism, and whether they're, we can study them together, should we separate them out, or how do they overlap, or how are they separate categories, and to begin to think about that from a research perspective. Now, I can tell you the press, the American press, really sometimes, the problem is sound bites, I think, a lot of times, and then you get these people on who have shows, and it's almost as if you're not going to get any more in the United States, this is my own opinion, that we're moving more from a more scientific approach or a more objective approach. It seems to me we're moving more to the right and more to the left, and I think that's dangerous. If I watch some right-wing news show and some left-wing news show, and I don't have a baseline to compare the accuracy, the political bias, and the objectivity, I'll run into a problem of being a very confused individual. And so I think we have to really look at the literature and then challenge the media. You know, unfortunately, the left and the right press tends to have on people who support whatever they're going to say. So it may not be that useful as far as advancing, first of all, our knowledge base, and secondly, thinking about policies. Just go out there and talk to some people. Ask them, you know, what is terrorism? What is a hate crime? And see what they say, and you'll begin to see and say, well, what is the motivation? Why do people engage in that behavior? And you start getting their theories and ask where they obtained that information. How do they support it? How confident are they of all this? I can tell you from my own scientific perspective, I'm not going to say I'm confident that my theory that I'm going to present is any better than other theories or will work. It's very tentative at this point. I'm still testing it out, and that's important to know. That's why I'm not on the press, because they say, well, how's your theory work? I said, well, I'm not quite sure. That kind of wraps things up there, and this wraps up this video, and I have some more on the way. Thank you.